magic word. Here in the secret kindergarten, the world's best show for kids is starting. The Secret Kindergarten Radio Show. Use your ears and your imagination. We're going to play, we're having fun. The Magic Secret Kindergarten on the Revolution Radio Station. Welcome back to the Secret Kindergarten. I'm your host, Gino. And today is Big Fat Story Time Day. Yep. I'm going to read you a big fat story by the brothers Grimm. And I'm going to do that now. And that's going to take us to the end of the show. So buckle up, buckaroo. Are you ready? Boy, I hope I'm ready. I've got a lot of reading to do. I just did a big burp. I put it on mute. Alright, this one is called The Robber and His Sons. Are you ready? Here we go. Once upon a time, a robber lived in a great forest and dwelled in ravines and caves with his companions. Whenever princes, noblemen, or rich merchants travelled on the highway, he ambushed them and robbed them of their gold and possessions. As he grew older, his occupation lost its appeal for him, and he regretted all the evil he had done. Consequently, he began to lead a decent and honest life and did good wherever he could. The people were surprised that he had changed so quickly, but they were glad that he had done so. Now, he had 3 sons, and when they had grown up, he gathered them around and said, "Tell me, my dear children, what do you want to become, and how do you intend to earn an honest living?" His sons discussed this together and gave him the following answer. "Like father, like son, we want to earn our living the way you earned yours, and intend to become robbers. We have no desire to work ourselves to the bone in some trade from morning to evening, nor do we want to lead a hard life with very little money." "Ah, dear children," the father replied, "why don't you want to be content with less and live in peace? Honesty is the best policy. Stealing is an evil and godless affair, and you'll end up in a bad way if you do it. You won't get any pleasure from the wealth that you obtain. I know exactly how I felt. I'm telling you, this won't turn out well for you. You can go only so far, and then you'll tie your own noose. In the end, when you're hanging from the gallows, you'll understand what I mean." But his sons did not heed his warnings, and remained resolute. Indeed, the 3 youths wanted to test their skill right away. They knew the queen had in her stables a splendid horse that was very valuable, and they intended to steal it. They also knew that the horse would eat nothing but tender grass that only grew in a damp forest. So they went into the forest, cut the grass, and made a large bundle out of it. Then the older sons placed the youngest in it, in such a way that he could not be seen. They then carried the bundle to the marketplace, and the queen's stable master bought the grass and had it carried to the stable and thrown into the horse's stall. When midnight came and everyone was asleep, the youngest son crawled out of the bundle untied the horse, put on him the golden bridle and the saddle embroidered with gold, and stuffed the bells that hung on it with wax, so that they could not make any noise. Next, he unlocked the stable door, rode away on the horse as fast as he could, and arrived at the place that his brothers had designated. However, the sentries in the city had seen the thief and pursued him. When they found him outside with his brothers, they captured all three and conducted them to the prison. The next morning, they were led before the queen, and when she saw that they were three handsome youths, she inquired about their family background and learned that they were sons of the old robber who had changed his life and had become one of her loyal subjects. She had the sons returned to the prison and sent a message to the father, asking him whether he wanted to obtain their release. The old man came and said, "It's not worth spending a penny for my son's release." Then the queen replied, "You were a well-known, notorious robber. Tell me about the most extraordinary adventure you had as a robber, and I'll return your sons to you." Upon hearing that, the old man began to speak. "Your Highness, listen to my story. I'm going to tell you about an incident that scared me more than anything in the world. Once I learned that a giant was living in a wild ravine between two mountains, 20 miles from any living person. And this giant possessed a great treasure of thousands of coins, gold and silver. I chose as many as 100 men from my band to go and look for the giant. It was a long, hard way between cliffs and deep gullies. We didn't find the giant at home and were glad about that. Then we took as much gold and silver as we could carry. And just as we were about to set out on our way home and thought we were quite safe, the giant came back unexpectedly with 10 other giants, and they took us all prisoner. They divided us among ourselves, with each receiving 10 men. I and 9 of my men fell to the giant, whose treasure we had taken. He tied our hands behind our backs and drove us like sheep into a cave. We tried to secure our release with money and possessions, but he answered, "I don't need your treasures. I'm going to keep you here and make a meal of you. That's more to my liking." Then he began feeling us and picked out one of the men. "He's the fattest," he said, "so I'll begin with him." After killing him, he threw chunks of his flesh into a kettle with water, which he set over a fire. When the flesh was boiled, he had his meal. Every day he ate one more of us, and since I was the leanest, I was to be the last. When my 9 companions had been devoured, and my turn arrived, I thought of a trick. "I can see that you have bad eyes," I said to him, "and that your sight is suffering. I'm a doctor and have a great deal of experience in my profession. I'll heal your eyes if you spare my life." He promised to spare my life if I could cure him, and he gave me everything I demanded. I put oil in a kettle, mixed in sulfur, pitch, salt, arsenic, and other deadly ingredients. Then I set the kettle over the fire as if I wanted to prepare a plaster for his eyes. As soon as the oil started to boil, the giant had to lie down, and I poured everything in the kettle on his eyes, his neck, and his body. so that he lost his sight completely, and the skin on his body burned and shriveled up. He leapt into the air with a horrible cry, threw himself down on the ground and rolled over and over, screaming and roaring like a lion or an ox. Then he jumped up in a rage, grabbed a large club and ran around the house, beating the floor and walls, trying to hit me. I couldn't escape because the house was surrounded by high walls, and the doors were bolted with iron bars. I sprang from one corner to the next until there was nothing left to do but climb a ladder up to the roof and hang from a beam with both my hands. I hung there a whole day and night, and when I could no longer hold out, I climbed down and mixed among the sheep. I had to be nimble and constantly run with the beasts through his legs so he wouldn't notice me. Finally, I found a ram's skin lying in a corner. I slipped into it and arranged it so that the ram's horns stood on my head. The giant had the habit of making the sheep run through his legs before he let them go out into the pasture. Then he counted them, and whichever was the most plump, he would grab and cook for his meal. I hoped to use this opportunity to escape, and I rushed through his legs as the sheep did. However, he grabbed me, and when he felt how heavy I was, he said, "Since you're so nice and plump, you'll fill my belly today." I leapt out of his hands, but he grabbed me again. Then I got away from him. But he seized me once more, and so it went 7 times. Finally, he became so furious he said, "All right, may the wolves eat you. I've had enough of your fooling around." When I was outside, I threw off the skin, yelled, taunted him, and made fun of him, so he knew that I had escaped. Then he pulled a ring from his finger and said, "Take this golden ring as a gift from me. You've earned it. It's not fitting that such a cunning and nimble man should leave here without a gift." I took the ring and put it on my finger, but I didn't know that it possessed magic. The moment the ring was on my finger, I had to keep crying out, "Here I am! Here I am!" whether I wanted to or not. Since the giant could tell by this where I was, he ran after me into the forest, but because he was blind, he kept bumping into branches or trees and fell down like a mighty tree. Yet he lifted himself up quickly, and since he had long legs and could take such large steps, he always caught up to me and was constantly close by. For I kept crying out, "Here I am! Here I am!" without stopping. I realized that the ring was the reason I was screaming that way, and tried to pull it off, but I couldn't do it. So there was nothing left to do but bite off my finger with my teeth. Then all at once I stopped screaming and succeeded in getting away from the giant. To be sure, I lost my finger, but I saved my life. "Your Highness," the robber said, "I've told you this story to gain the release of one of my sons. Now I'll tell you what happened afterward, in order to free my second son. When I had escaped from the hands of the giant, I wandered about in the wilderness, and didn't know where to turn. I climbed the highest fir trees and the peaks of mountains, but even though I gazed far and wide, I couldn't locate a single house, nor could I see a field or a trace of human existence. Just terrible wilderness. So I descended the mountains that were as high as heaven, and entered the valleys that were as deep as the deepest canyons. There I encountered lions, bears, buffalo, mules, poisonous snakes and gruesome reptiles. I saw wild, hairy forest creatures, people with horns and beaks so horrible that I still shudder every time when I think back on them. I moved on and was tormented by hunger and thirst. I was afraid I would collapse at any moment from fatigue. Finally, just as the sun was about to set and I was on top of a high mountain, I saw some smoke rising in a lonely valley, as if it were coming from a burning stove. I ran down the mountain toward the smoke as fast as I could. When I got there, I saw 3 dead men hanging from the branch of a tree. I was terrified, for I thought another giant would soon get me in his hands, and I feared for my life. However, I took heart, went on, and found a cottage where the door stood wide open. A woman was sitting by the fire of the hearth with her child. I entered, greeted her, and asked why she was sitting there so alone and where her husband was. I also asked how far it was to some settlement where people were living. She told me that there were people living in a country that was far away, and with tears in her eyes, she revealed that wild forest monsters had come the previous night and had stolen her and her child from her husband's side and brought them into that wilderness. The monsters had departed that morning, but they had ordered her to kill her child and cook him, because they wanted to eat him when they returned. Upon hearing that, I felt great pity for the woman and her child, and decided to help her out of her predicament. I ran to the tree on which the 3 thieves were hanging, took down the middle one, who was stocky, and carried him into the house. I cut him into pieces and told the woman to give him to the giants to eat. Meanwhile, I took the child and hid him in a hollow tree. Then I concealed myself behind the house so that I would be able to tell when the wild creatures were back, and whether it would be necessary to rush to the aid of the woman. Just as the sun was about to set, I saw the monsters coming down from the mountain. They were a gruesome and terrible sight and looked like apes. They were dragging a dead boy after them, but I couldn't see who it was. When they entered the house, they lit a large fire, tore apart the bloody body with their teeth, and devoured it. Afterward, they took from the fire the kettle in which the thief's flesh had been cooked, and divided the pieces among themselves for their supper. When they were done, the one who appeared to be their chief asked the woman whether the flesh that they had eaten was the flesh of her child. The woman said yes. Then the monster said, "I think you hid your child and cooked one of the thieves who was hanging on the branch." He ordered 3 of his companions to run over there and bring a piece of meat from each of the 3 thieves so that he could see if they were all there. When I heard that, I ran ahead of them and hung myself between the 2 thieves, using my hands and the rope that I had taken from the 3rd thief. When the monsters came, they cut a piece of flesh from the thigh of each thief, and they also cut a piece of my own thigh. But I withstood the pain without uttering a sound. As proof, I still have a scar on my body. The robber paused for a moment and then continued. "Your Highness, I've told you this adventure for my 2nd son. Now I'll tell you the end of the story for my 3rd. When the wild men ran back to the house with the 3 pieces of flesh, I got down from the branch and bandaged my wounds with strips from my shirt as best as I could. But the blood kept oozing and flowing from the wound, Still, I didn't pay any attention. And I kept thinking about my promise to the woman. I wanted to save her and her child, so I hurried back to the house, kept myself hidden, and listened to what was going on. I could hold myself erect only with great difficulty, since my wound hurt me and I was completely exhausted from hunger and thirst. Meanwhile, the giant tasted the 3 pieces of flesh that had been carried to him. And when he had eaten the piece of flesh that had been cut out of my body and was still bloody, he said, "Run back and bring me the middle thief. His flesh is still fresh and pleases me." When I heard that, I rushed back to the gallows and hung myself with the rope once more and dangled between the 2 men. Soon after, the monsters came, took me down, and dragged me over thorns and thistles to the house, where they stretched me out on the floor. They sharpened their teeth, whetted their knives, and got ready to slaughter and eat me. Just as they were about to put their hands on me, a sudden storm erupted with lightning, thunder, and wind, so that the monsters themselves got frightened and plunged through the windows, doors, and roof with horrible shrieks. They left me lying on the floor, and after 3 hours, the day began, and the bright sun rose in the sky. I departed with the woman and the child, and we wandered for 40 days through the wilderness, and had no other food but roots, berries, and herbs that were grown in the forest. Finally, we found people, and I brought the woman back to her husband. You can surely imagine how great this joy was. With that, the robber's story came to an end. By saving the woman and her child, you made up for many evil deeds, the queen said. Now I'm going to set your 3 sons free. That was a good Grimm story. What do you reckon? Pretty grim, all right? But hey, all that matters is that you're good today. If you were naughty yesterday, doesn't matter, just be good today, okay? And today is June the 16th here in New Zealand. It's June the 15th in America, but for June the 16th, today's daily words of wisdom, thanks to Manly P. Hall, are these. By faith, a person should know that just as they exist, their existence is essentially good. If they learn how to achieve this goodness, the evil of their life comes from their own fears and uncertainties. Does that make sense? It's a tricky one. Don't be afraid. And make up your mind. Decide what you want to do. And you know what? It's probably going to be a good thing. And that's that. So, if you like this show, any of you kids out there like this show, or if you know any kids that want to listen to this show instead of the TV, because instead of watching the TV, you can get some headphones. You can buy some of those big headphones. Don't turn the volume up too loud, and I promise you, young children will sit for longer with a pair of headphones on than they would in front of the TV, I promise you that. I've seen it with my own eyes. So listening is fun. And you can check it out. All the episodes are on YouTube, BitChute, Odysee, blah, 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 Rumble, Bumble, Dumble, all of that. Thanks so much for listening. Remember, I love you. Bye.